And what I will say is, if you guys do want to donate, we'll put a link in the description box to the Japanese Red Cross Society. But yeah, obviously anything you can donate to help, much appreciated to the people there.
Wow.
Hello and welcome to the Abroad in Japan podcast, probably the best way of learning about life in Japan without actually being in Japan. I'm your host, Chris Broad, and we're joined as always by England's top Japan enthusiast, Mr. Pete Donaldson, for the first, or dare I say second, podcast of 2024. How you doing, Pete? What's going on?
Did you just call me Pete Donaldson? You were quaking at the very idea of me being on the podcast. Hello, Chris. I have entered 2024 in the manner in which I left 2023. I've decided to, continue experimenting with my fashion choices, and I'm currently wearing a red jumper and a red cardigan. I'm doubling up on the red, and I think I'm probably just going to buy all red clothes, red Tory trousers, and just stride into 2024 as the red man, not the one out
Father
of
Christmas,
the Wu-Tang Clan.
Your face also, well, I don't know if it's the camera.
Quite red.
It's quite red. Have you got the clothes to match the face? What's going on with the face?
Well, I've got a 3-bar heater. I've got a 3-bar heater that is just like deliciously empty of electronics. It's just like a couple of heating coils, and I've got it up to absolute maximum because it is bloody freezing in Southend. So yeah.
That's what happens when you do a podcast in a shed at the bottom of your garden instead of the warm, cosy, toasty Abroad Japan podcast studio. Although, to be fair, I have to switch the heating off because you can hear it apparently on the microphone. So it'll soon be cold in here.
Enjoy getting chilly, baby.
But, of course, it isn't the nicest start to the year for Japan, as you guys are probably aware. We recorded the last 3 episodes sort of in advance over the Christmas holidays, and we've sort of lots of bad things have been happening in the week since then. And we're going to talk about both the earthquake, the plane crash, and a few other things that have been happening in Japan. Like it's been really bad. How's the news coverage been of the earthquake and everything over in the UK, Pete?
It's been. I think obviously Japan's a place that gets a lot of earthquakes. I think when you sort of see a map of Japan in situations like this, it's always quite startling that they know one place and one place alone in Japan, and it's Tokyo. So you literally have the epicenter of the earthquake, which is obviously off coast in this particular situation, and you'll just have like a massive like ring of where the sort of the radius of influence of the earthquake was, and then you'll just have Tokyo, and that it's always quite stark. It seems to be the only place that anyone gives a toss about is what's happening in Tokyo. Has anyone been hurt at Tokyo? And obviously, but I mean, yeah, it's been pretty heavy coverage, and as it should be, because obviously these things don't happen all the time in Japan, and certainly this has been pretty high on it's the Shindo scale, isn't it? In Japan, they don't call it the hour scale. It's the Shindo scale. I think it was a 7, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a little bit complicated. There's sort of 2 ways of measuring like an earthquake in Japan. They've got the magnitude, and this was 7.6, which is very high. It's not as high as the Tohoku one in 2011, which was 9 magnitude, which is insane. Yeah. But that earthquake sort of happened, I think, 50 to 100 kilometers off of the east coast of Japan, whereas this one was pretty much directly below the Noto peninsula. Right. And so it really, hit them head on. And there's 7 scales, the Shindo scale in Japan, and 6 or 7. The Shindo scale is more about actually the physical damage and sort of if you can stand up or not. And when it gets to about 6 or 7, that's the point where you can't physically stand up. And if you watch videos of the earthquake that happened on January 1st, it's terrifying. Like, you literally cannot stand up. Now, I've never experienced an earthquake of that scale, though we did have quite a big one in Sendai 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago now, and I was in an apartment block at the time that was quite big and was able to sort of take it, so it was swaying. But the studio at the time, that got rattled, as we saw, and that building that the studio was in Sendai it was sort of dated back to the 1970s, and before I think 1981, Japanese buildings weren't really certified for earthquakes, or they weren't sort of able to handle earthquakes, and the studio got really badly hit. And I think that's a big factor in why folks were kind of affected in Noto, because of these lots of old houses, traditional houses that simply aren't like equipped to really handle this sort of earthquake. But I think a lot of people were shocked about where the earthquake happened, right? Because we're so used to it happening on the east side of Japan or down in places like Kyushu, like the Kumamoto earthquake in 2018. I think it sort of surprised people where it was happening when it did happen on January 1st. But yeah, I mean, really just a horrible situation, and I think 110 fatalities as well, which is pretty high.
From what I heard, it wasn't even necessarily the violence of the actual quake itself. It's when you know it's a bad one. It's the ones that last for quite a long time. Because I mean, Chris, you must be used to feeling tremors all the time, but be in a situation where you are dealing with something that happens for longer than 20 seconds. I mean, that must be really scary stuff. You must be wondering when it's all going to end, I suppose.
Well, yeah, I mean the one in 2022 that didn't stop, and that was earthquakes do come and go. They last sort of 10 seconds, I'd say, on average. And the one I experienced then, it was sort of 2 earthquakes back to back that took over a minute, and that is really scary. You think like the world's ending. And I remember speaking to Natsuki and Ryota about the big one, the magnitude 9, and they were just like, it didn't stop. And with the one in Noto, there's been a lot of sort of earthquakes, aftershocks following on from it as well, rattling in the area even more. But of course, there was also a tsunami warning, which is, I remember I was just going to bed, I think, or it was about 4 p.m. in the afternoon. And I remember just seeing the tsunami warning, and like that is something we haven't seen in a long time. I was really concerned about that because obviously in the big 2011 earthquake tsunami, it was the tsunami that caused most of the destruction. And most of the deaths were attributed to the tsunami, which I often remind myself, like I often watch footage of tsunamis because I think most people don't realise what a tsunami is. We sort of picture like almost like a movie, like that one wave, that big scary wave coming towards you, right? But it isn't sort of one wave. It's imagine like a wave but of constant pressure, of constant power, right? So when that wall hits, it just keeps coming. It's not like one solitary wave. It's like the whole sea coming at you.
You're imagining like where it breaks is where it does all the damage. It's not. It's just literally picking up everything and smashing every heavy object into every heavy building. And I guess, so presumably it didn't cause quite so much of a. I think there were meter high waves. It was still quite destructive, but it was only meter high waves because it happened mainly on land rather than really far out as the last one did. But again, like a lot of the. I remember going to the earthquake museum in Kobe, and a lot of like the damage and a lot of like the chaos and a lot of the terrible kind of loss of life happens kind of in the wake of it, just with stuff like fires and gas explosions and stuff like that. Our lives are filled with things that can create sparks and create. We're very electrified in modern life, and so these things do. These things do find their way into creating some quite spectacular results in the wake of something like this. So they're probably quite lucky that it hasn't been more, to be honest. It's an astonishing amount of people to lose their lives, but hopefully the aftershocks have ceased now, and they can kind of get away with kind of continuing the rescue efforts. And it's not. It would probably be helped if this was done, if the earthquake happened in more like less kind of like remote areas, because there's not a lot of people sort of living all sort of clumped together in these places, are they? It's these kind of like little villages, I suppose, around that have so much trouble with these earthquakes.
Yeah, I mean the Noto Peninsula it's fairly remote, and so I guess cities like Kanazawa and Toyama, as far as I know, weren't that badly affected. They're kind of lucky in the sense that neck of the woods, particularly like Fukui, has I think more nuclear power stations per capita than any other prefecture in Japan. I think they're kind of lucky that they didn't seem to be affected or nothing went wrong there. But one astonishing thing I read today was that the coastline, bits of the coastline were expanded like 175 meters. They're just, if you look at satellite images and photos of the coastline, it seems to have shifted the coastline, which is insane,
There was shots of like football pitches that had massive kind of fault lines in them and stuff. They were just kind of like it just looked like completely unworkable from here on in. They're gonna have to figure something out. But when you watch, I think it's images like that where you sort of go, the perversity of the whole thing, like how kind of changing one kind of like sporting venue into this thing that can never be used again effectively. It's the absurdity of what an earthquake can do really sort of hits home, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I've thought about, could I go there? Could I help in any way? But they're sort of deterring folks from just going there. They want emergency service people only. And what I will say is, if you guys do want to donate, we'll put a link in the description box to the Japanese Red Cross Society below. I looked around and I think they're the easiest to donate to if English speakers. But yeah, obviously anything you can donate to help, much appreciated to the people there. And maybe when the situation's stabilised, I would like to go there and try and find out, what the situation is. I think it's really important.
I think at this point, you have certain skills, Chris, and YouTubers have certain skills, and people, I think that the level of help that needs to, when you're talking about pulling people out of buildings and stuff, I mean that is, and securing sort of routes for food and water and stuff like that. It takes a level of preparedness that can only be done on a governmental level, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, but I do want to go there when the situation's stabilised somewhat and shine a light on the area. But for now, if you can donate, guys, Japanese Red Cross in the description box below. I did actually see some like Japanese nuisance YouTubers were going to the bloody, going there and trying to almost cash in on the PR aspect of it, which was rather like unpleasant, and they were called out for it. Famously, in the 1995 Kobe earthquake, the Yakuza stepped up. I say stepped up. They got pretty hands-on with things because the Yamaguchi-gumi clan are headquartered in Kobe, and they got a lot of good PR out of it at the time. So, yeah, it's interesting seeing people react to it and how they can almost like really cynically kind of try and get something out of it, which is awful.
Our nuisance YouTubers, the organised crime of Japan now.
Yeah, honestly.
The Yakuza have kind of calmed themselves down.
Nightmare. But of course, that wasn't the only thing that happened, and there's been sort of a few days of bad things happening. The second thing, on the second day of January, the second day of the year, when it seemed things couldn't get worse, there was a plane crash at Haneda Airport. A Japan Airlines flight from Hokkaido, A350 plane, collided with a small turboprop Coast Guard plane at 5:47, and the Coast Guard plane was, was about to go off and send aid to the west side of Japan, to where the earthquake was. If you've seen the footage of it, it's incredible watching this plane land on fire, everyone get off. There were 367 people on the plane, 12 crew as well, and they all got off unscathed. Unfortunately, the Coast Guard weren't so lucky. 5 of the 6 crew passed away there. But I think almost people are sort of seeing it as a bit of a miracle that everyone got off the plane, off the A350, unscathed, especially as the state of the plane at the end of it, right, when it was almost burnt to a crisp. Pretty incredible stuff. What did you make of it?
It's kind of it's one of the most spectacular bits of footage. I think obviously the plane coming to land, hitting the plane, and just kind of becoming a bit of a fireball. I think I've spoke about him before on the show, but like the Mentor pilot, a Swedish pilot who basically goes through all of these kind of like historical aeronautic disasters and basically explains why they happened, how they could have been fixed, and how rare I think a lot of these situations are and accidents are, simply because air traffic control are just so incredibly well drilled. And his kind of main message on most of these kind of like disasters is when people have got out of planes this quickly, they sort of say what an incredible performance from the crew, from the stewards, just an incredible display of airmanship, of stewardship to get that amount of people off a burning plane and burning to that degree as well. The people, it was JAL, wasn't it? I mean, the Japanese
Japan
airline,
Airlines,
Japan Airlines crew need to be commendated for their quick and safe work in such trying conditions. And at this moment in time, nobody really knows what's went on. I think air traffic controller saying that the plane wasn't cleared for takeoff. It shouldn't have been on the runway, but then there's footage from NHK that sort of sees the plane on the runway for a full 45 seconds. So something's gone wrong there. There's been a lack of communication, and obviously it kind of helps that the pilot is still alive, and it seems like he's speaking. So more news, I'm sure will emerge, and we're just so happy that in such a dire circumstance, so many people have managed to get themselves out. So yeah, I mean, amazing work, and you know, our thoughts go out to the crew of the plane that was hit.
Yeah, I saw some folks tussling online about. Some people said, it's because it's Japanese folks, they got off the airline so promptly and so efficiently,
right? Okay,
whatever.
yeah.
And some folks said, it's a generalization of Japanese passengers, although they contrasted it with some footage of a plane where people were like bringing all their luggage off during a fire. They were coming down the slide with their suitcases, and
I think there's a fire and then there's a fire. I think you can tell between a fire and that fire. That fire was that fire. Good God.
Yeah, but I'm from my experience, people are very. One thing about I love flying domestically in Japan because people are so brilliant at just getting on the plane quick, and they get on. They don't block the aisle. They're very mindful. They just get to their seat, chuck the bag up, job done. And when you fly domestically in Europe, it's always like a nightmare because people sort of treat it like it's a slow thing. They can just sort of amble onto the plane and whatnot. So
they queue up. They queue up at the terminal building, and then just kind of spend it and just panicking. Everyone's just panicking. Oh God! But I mean, you know, and maybe physically different sizes. You know, I guess Japanese people are a little kind of they're not as wide, I suppose. So you know that's going to make things easier, I think.
Yeah, that's
they sort
accurate
of
generalisation, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you got to think about these things, how distasteful it is. I think the interesting thing, I think a lot of these planes, when they're kind of tested as to how quickly people can escape in an emergency, quite apart from people collecting baggage and being idiots and you know going against what the stewards are saying, they're actually tested by, I think, army guys, you know what I mean? Like fit, young, small, lithe,
nimble.
Just nimble people who can get from one place to another quite quickly and in an organised and orderly fashion. So I think I heard anecdotally a story of they were testing some airplane and basically the army captain just went, right lads, you know, the beers are on me if you get out in this particular time, and all these lads are just they're used to taking orders, they're used to being orderly, they're used to sort of helping each other out and getting from one place to the other quite quickly. So I think that, you know, these planes are tested with quite fit, small people in mind, or they certainly used to be anyway. So it may be a very different situation when you've got larger, more obstructive, more witless people, let's say.
I'd probably fall over and block the slide if I was escaping.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Just the footage of everyone getting off the plane.
Yeah.
Just the footage of everyone getting off, really.
It's incredible. It's incredible, and well done to those people for saving so many lives. Incredible.
Absolutely. But yeah, not a great start to Japan for 2024. I saw like a ridiculous viral tweet where it was like hypothesized that in like the big New Year's show that Japan has, one of the cast members of the show dropped some lucky thing, and it was like attributed to his bad luck dropping the toy or some nonsense.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, with this earthquake, and you know, to a lesser extent, the plane. They may not celebrate Christmas, but surely they still celebrate New Year's, and families will be together at this point in the year.
Absolutely. Yeah, I saw Natsuki posted on Instagram because people were like really worried about Natsuki because he's on the west coast, of course, in Sakata, which had a tsunami warning. It had like the second worst tsunami warning, but he posted like a jovial photo of himself in Tokyo Station shopping. And he was like, I'm good. It's like,
Natsuki.
Bloody hell, Natsuki.
Good old Natsuki. No one
And
can
thanks for all the
defeat
kind
Natsuki.
words. Wow. Thanks for the kind words, guys. We were for the most part fine. Yeah, everyone was fine. That I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, send anything you can to the Japanese Red Cross, and let's dive in to the fax machine in just a moment.
Wow.
And we're back with the fax machine with your stories, comments, and questions. What have we got this week from our listeners, Mr. Dawson?
Dear Mr. Sunday Times bestseller and Mr. Coolish connoisseur, my name is Laurence and I am from Belgium. And this is a little story of how I appeared on Japanese TV. In November, I travelled to Japan for the second time, and this time around I decided to solo travel a big chunk of Hokkaido, which was absolutely amazing. But on my last day in Tokyo, I felt like I had to do a quick speed run of Tokyo highlights. Upon arriving at the Shibuya crossing, I was stopped by a camera crew and interviewer. They interviewed me about sukiyaki and whether I tried it before and liked it. Classic Japanese telly. She's obsessed with food. Towards the end of the interview, they invited me to have sukiyaki on the following Monday for their show. Sadly, I told them I had a flight the following morning and I was not able to attend their big sukiyaki circus. Thinking they would not be satisfied with an incomplete interview, I didn't think much of it. However, less than a week after I got home, a Japanese friend texted me saying, "Hey, you were on Japanese TV." It wasn't an experience on my bucket list, but I'm happy to be able to cross it off the list. Thank you for everything that you do and keep up the great videos and podcast. And Laurence has attached a picture, and it's basically just them in the middle of Tokyo saying that he has had sukiyaki. It's just absolutely bizarre.
Lucky guy. This the TV show called like Why Have You Come to Japan, or What You're Doing in Japan.
Okay, right.
I can't remember the name of it. Nani Nihon ni Why the fuck do you come to Japan? Something like that.
Right.
And they basically just stand around the airport, and when a foreigner walks through, they go, "What are you doing here? Why are you coming to Japan?" And if you are doing something moderately interesting, they will follow you and just follow you around Japan. And I remember we had a guy, I think from Germany, who had watched a Abroad in Japan video on wankosoba, the noodle challenge. And they were like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "I'm going to do the wankosoba noodle challenge. I saw it on Abroad in Japan." And they played the Abroad in Japan clip of me doing it. And then they followed him on the big journey north to Morioka. And they followed him and they watched him eat it. And it just must have been really surreal. It's this German guy.
This show has no plan. This show has no plan of actually what they're doing. We'll just follow this guy 2 hours out of Tokyo, shall we?
It's kind of cool
incredible.
in some respects. Like, you're coming here on holiday. All of a sudden, you're a national celebrity. You're a national treasure on Japanese television with a big crew following you around. Rather intimidating, I'm sure. But what an experience. What an experience. It's a shame it hasn't happened to you yet. You'd be so fun. Like, all the weird, obscure shit that you do. I think that'd be so funny. I'm going to go look at a tea shop in Niigata.
I was interviewed in Super Potato, me and my friend Alex, and I had a it was Halloween. He said, "What are you doing in Japan?" I think it's probably the same TV show. Maybe I was there. Maybe I was on there. If they're going to put a man who, to be honest, Laurence has emailed and never actually said whether he's actually had sukiyaki or not. He said that he's been asked about sukiyaki, but we're in the dark still about whether Laurence has had sukiyaki. So do let us know, Laurence. I'm on tenterhooks here, for crying out loud. So I still don't know whether the binary yes or no, whether sukiyaki has bothered Laurence's lips. I'm completely in the dark. I'm a little bit upset about it. But no, I was in Super Potato, and and they asked me what we were doing around Halloween. I said, well, we're going to go to a party. We're going to go to a party, and I'd bought a little costume, and I was dressed as Minnie Mouse. So
Minnie Mouse.
I was that night I was dressed as Minnie Mouse, and she said, "Oh, sugoi." I went, "Sexy." So maybe that was on breakfast television in Japan. Me talking about my sexy Minnie Mouse costume.
Wow, that sounds.
Yeah.
That must have confused the hell out of them. This man.
Aroused the hell out of them.
I bet. Bloody hell. We got one here from Cole Zimmerman. Cole Zimmerman. He says, "Dear Cauliflower Chris and Prickly Pear Pete, I have heard that sometimes Japanese restaurants that are very dingy and possibly unclean are known for having some of the best food. Have there been any times in the past where you've eaten at a restaurant where it's perhaps a little too dingy for your taste and made the meal taste worse because of the thought of the kitchen Or have you really never minded? I've started working at McDonald's recently, and I don't know if I can eat their food ever again because of how disturbing some of the scenes in the kitchen there are, from a curious viewer. That's an interesting question, actually. Like a lot of Japanese restaurants, they're sort of mum and pop shops, right? Run in a house sometimes. And, you do look over the kitchen counter and go, oh, I don't really want to look over there because they're not as clean as you would necessarily like. But then it's almost reassuring that you can see into the kitchen in a lot of Japanese restaurants far more often, I would say, than sort of a restaurant in the UK or the West maybe. But I don't know. Can you think of a restaurant you've been to where you've been put off by seeing into the kitchen or the atmosphere?
I don't think so. I mean, I think me and you had that meal in Kobe of the fancy A5 Wagyu steak, and we basically we basically sat down and we were doing a bit of filming or whatever, and I looked through the kitchen, and it was a really nice, clean kitchen. It was a really top class steak restaurant, but the guy was just,
wasn't he?
He was just he just didn't have a tab on, and he looked at me.
That, yeah.
And looked at the kitchen and then just slammed the door of the back door so he could smoke outside in peace. But I did sort of go, what are you doing out there? Oh,
bloody hell. Oh, my God. Yeah, I mean, when you go out to the countryside, you will go to some pretty dicey looking restaurants. I always find yakiniku restaurants, like grilled meat, are the ones to watch out for because they're often very cheap sort of restaurants. You have your own grill, and then you get a big plate, a slab of meat to eat, and often there's not much of a kitchen. It's just like the meat is ready to go, raw, and you have to cook it yourself. Those are the ones to watch out for. I went to a dicey one with Ryotaro once in Iwate, and I remember it was like horse intestines or something, and God,
why horse intestines? Surely any animal's intestines are the same. Give me a cow's intestine. It's going to be the same as a horse, isn't it?
Ryotaro is not a man that plays by the rules. He insisted I eat it. I don't think I did. And he had a cow's uterus and all this other just awful food.
It's dog food. I was like, it's the sort of thing that I buy the dogs. Like my dogs have a real penchant for the old, the fibrous kind of stuff. Like I don't mind eating offal in like Chinese restaurants because they just spice it up and it's nice and it's good. Szechuan like proper like guts with like the inside of a stomach with like mad kind of like little cells in and stuff. It's great, but. I just think the Japanese are just so they love like the purity of the flavour of the food and they don't flavour it enough to disguise what exactly I know it is.
Yeah, it's accurate. Yeah, that's a fair point actually. Yeah, you certainly notice that with Japanese food, they really don't. They keep it simple. I kind of like that though. Like sushi in North America, Europe, they have lots of like sushi rolls, lots of different flavourings and things, but.
Yeah,
I've never had sushi that is as good as Japan. And Japan, it keeps it simple. Just the best rice, made in the best way, vinegared rice, done to perfection, with a nice cut of fresh fish. And that's it, simple. And I like that. And I think that's one thing Japan gets right. Simplicity.
I went to a Japanese restaurant last night. There's a Japanese restaurant quite close to us these days. And it's a Japanese lady who's opened it up with her two kids. And she does a bloody lovely job. I had beef gyudon bowl and she was takoyaki and stuff, and I was with a friend's baby and I was feeding them salmon.
You're with a friend's baby.
Cooked salmon with the old chopsticks. We were looking after a baby, so I was feeding them with chopsticks. So I think it's the first time she's ever been fed with chopsticks. And you've seen my chopsticks technique. I'm terrible at it.
Yes. The word appalling. Your chopstick skills are pretty scary. I think you nearly took someone's eye out the last time I saw you at a restaurant. Be careful.
It's the one thing. It's the one thing that when I've been on the rare occasion I'm on a Abroad Japan video, it's the one thing that people do comment about.
You hold the chopsticks like knives, Pete.
Next to me being too woke. I'm too woke and I can't use chopsticks.
And you have a red face.
Flipping do. And I have a big red face.
My God. And on that note, keep your stories, questions, comments coming into abroadjapanpodcast@gmail.com, or leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube down below. But for now, guys, we'll be back talking about 2024 in the next episode, in the next few days. But for now, have yourselves a good one. We'll see you right back here to do all over again on the Abroad Japan podcast. Bye for now.